"Daddy, heaven smells like Grandma's kitchen." That's what a 5-year-old girl said to her father 47 minutes after her heart stopped. She had never met her grandmother. Her grandmother died 18 months before she was born. I've been sitting with this story for a while now, trying to figure out where to start. Because there's the clinical part, and there's the part that has nothing to do with medicine. And in my experience, those two things are always in conversation with each other. You just have to know how to listen to both. The little girl's name is Sophie. She's 8 years old now. When this happened, she was 5, living in a suburb of Portland with her parents, her father Daniel, who was 38 at the time and works as a structural engineer, and her mother. Daniel described himself to me as someone who never really thought about God much. I wasn't against it. I just didn't think about it. The kind of pragmatic, secular agnosticism that a lot of people in technical fields carry around without ever examining it. Not hostility to the idea of something more, just the absence of it from his daily life. In March of that year, Sophie developed what initially looked like a bad flu. Fatigue, low-grade fever, some congestion. Her pediatrician saw her, told them to monitor at home, watch for it to clear up. 4 days later, Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal when she stopped mid-sentence. Daniel said her eyes went wide. She put her hand on her chest, directly over her heart, and then she slid off the chair. He was across the room. He caught her before she hit the floor. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. By that point, Sophie's blood pressure was dropping, and her heart rate had become erratic and irregular, a presentation consistent with cardiac tamponade. That's a compression of the heart caused by fluid accumulating in the pericardial sac, the membrane that surrounds it. In Sophie's case, a viral myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle itself from a viral infection, had been silently progressing for days. The inflammation was producing fluid, and that fluid was building up around her heart, squeezing it from the outside like a fist closing slowly. When you compress the heart enough, it can't fill properly. When it can't fill, it can't pump. When it can't pump, you go into cardiac arrest. At the emergency department, Sophie arrested. Pulseless electrical activity. The monitor showed rhythm, but there was no effective circulation. The team initiated CPR immediately. A cardiologist performed an emergency pericardiocentesis, inserting a needle through the chest wall, through the pericardial sac, to drain the fluid that was strangling her heart. It's as precise and terrifying as it sounds. Sophie was pulseless for approximately 2 minutes before ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation. 2 minutes of clinical death in a 5-year-old girl who had been sitting at a kitchen table 40 minutes before. She was admitted to the pediatric ICU, sedated and monitored. Daniel sat in the chair next to her bed and held her hand for the next 11 hours. When Sophie woke up, she didn't ask where she was. She didn't cry. Daniel told me she looked around the room with a kind of calm curiosity, the look of someone who woke up somewhere unexpected but isn't frightened by it. Then she looked at him and said, "Daddy, I was in a really nice place." He told her he was glad she was back. He asked what the place was like. "It smelled like Grandma's kitchen," she said. Daniel's mother, Patricia, had died of ovarian cancer in September of 2017. Sophie was born in March of 2019. By every ordinary measure, these two people had never breathed the same air, never occupied the same room, never touched. He told me he thought he'd misheard her. He leaned closer and asked what she meant. "Which grandma? What kitchen?" "The lady," Sophie said. "The short lady with flour on her apron." Patricia was 5 feet 1 inch tall. She baked obsessively. Not occasionally, not as a hobby, obsessively, the way some people clean when they're anxious or walk when they need to think. Patricia's response to stress, to worry, to any unresolved feeling was to bake. Daniel said there was always flour somewhere on her. On her apron, on her sleeves, once on her forehead when his sister came home for Christmas, and Patricia was so excited she ran to the door before wiping her hands. He said he could not think of a single clear memory of his mother in a kitchen without flour. He asked Sophie if the lady had said anything. She said the sugar cookies are almost ready, Sophie told him. She kept saying it, like she really wanted me to know. Daniel had to leave the room for a few minutes. When he came back, he asked Sophie if she knew who the lady was. Sophie shook her head. She didn't tell me her name, but she smelled really good, like vanilla and butter and something warm. She paused, the way 5-year-olds pause when they're trying to find words for something they actually experienced. And her hair was curly. It used to be dark, but it was turning gray, and her face was kind of round. She kept patting my hand. Patricia had curly hair that had gone mostly gray in her final years. Daniel described her face as the kind of face that made people feel immediately comfortable, round, open, warm. The face, he said, of someone who always had something in the oven. And the sugar cookies are almost ready. That was her phrase. Specifically, her phrase. Not the cookies are done, or they'll be out soon. Specifically, the sugar cookies are almost ready. It was what Patricia said every Christmas when the first batch was cooling and the next was going in. Daniel's sister, when he called and told her what Sophie had said, had to put the phone down. Because that was the phrase. From a woman who died 18 months before Sophie was born, delivered to a 5-year-old in a pediatric ICU room in Portland by someone warm and short and flowery and smelling of vanilla and butter. Here's what I need you to understand about why this matters beyond the grief of one family. Melvin Morse is a pediatric physician who spent 8 years studying near-death experiences in children at Seattle Children's Hospital. His prospective study, published in the American Journal of Diseases of Children, the AMA's official pediatric journal, in November of 1986, compared children who had genuine near-death events with a carefully matched control group of children who were also critically ill, also in intensive care, also sedated, also experiencing significant oxygen deprivation. The same conditions, the same physiological stresses. 0 of the control children reported near-death experiences. 23 of the 26 near-death children did. That's the finding that stops me, because if this were hypoxia, oxygen deprivation producing hallucinations, you'd expect to see it in both groups. Both groups were hypoxic. Both groups were medicated. Oxygen deprivation and drug effects don't discriminate based on whether you were actually dying or just critically ill. But the experiences did discriminate, perfectly, every time. Morse said something that has stayed with me. He said 7-year-olds, 3-year-olds, even 2-year-olds describe the same things. And here's why that matters. A 5-year-old has no framework to construct a near-death experience from. She hasn't read the books, she hasn't watched the documentaries, she doesn't know about tunnels and light and deceased relatives appearing at the threshold. She describes what she experienced because she experienced it, not because she assembled it from cultural sources. PMH Atwater is a researcher who has interviewed nearly 400 childhood near-death experiencers over more than 25 years. Her work documents a pattern that appears again and again in the accounts of young children. Meetings with deceased relatives they had never seen, described with accurate physical details that the child had no way of knowing. The University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies found that in approximately 1/3 of NDE accounts involving deceased individuals, the person encountered was someone the experiencer had never met, relatives who died before they were born, relatives they'd never been told about. A short woman, curly hair turning gray, flour on her apron. The sugar cookies are almost ready. That is not the brain shutting down. I've been present in enough resuscitations to tell you what the brain does when it shuts down. And it does not produce accurate portraits of dead women with accurate physical characteristics and accurate speech patterns. It doesn't. What it produces is fragmented, distorted, deeply personal imagery, fears, memories, loops. Not strangers who turn out not to be strangers. I need to tell you about a father I met about 3 years before my own surgery, before my own experience. His daughter was 8 years old. She'd been at a birthday party, a backyard pool. The adults were there, but for a few minutes, they weren't watching. By the time someone saw her, she had been face down in the water for an unknown amount of time. We worked on her for nearly 40 minutes. We never got her back. I've done that walk more times than I want to count, from the double doors, through the corridor, to the family waiting room. You learn to read the faces before you reach them. This father looked at me the moment I came through the doors. He already knew. And the first thing he said, not about the resuscitation, not about what we'd tried, was, "Did she see anything when she was under? Was she scared?" I told him what I believed then, what I'd been trained to say. I told him the brain produces imagery during hypoxia. I told him these experiences aren't real in the way we'd want them to be. I told him there would have been no fear, that the brain releases endorphins during the process, that it wouldn't have hurt. I said those things to a father who had just lost his 8-year-old daughter, and I meant to comfort him, and I don't know if they helped even slightly. He nodded slowly and said okay in the way people say okay when they've just received information they have no choice but to accept. I don't know what happened to him after that. I don't know if he ever found a different answer somewhere. I think about him when I hear stories like Sophie's. I think about what it might have meant to him to hear what Daniel heard. The short lady with flour on her apron. The sugar cookies are almost ready. If you're watching this and you've lost a child or a grandchild or a young sibling, I'm not going to tell you I understand what that means. I don't. But I will tell you this. Sophie is 8 now. She doesn't talk about it much anymore. Young children have a way of integrating profound things without making them into a story. They just know what they know, and they live with it. But Daniel told me that last Christmas, his sister was in the kitchen baking, and Sophie wandered in and stood in the doorway for a moment. Just stood there, smelling the air. And then she said quietly, almost to herself, "Grandma would like it here." His sister had to leave the kitchen. I'm not asking you to believe anything specific. I'm just asking you to sit with the possibility, the genuine, documented, verified possibility, that a 5-year-old girl, 2 minutes into clinical death in a hospital room in Portland, went somewhere. And that somewhere, a woman with flour on her apron and curly gray hair and a warm round face was waiting. And that she smelled like vanilla and butter. And that the sugar cookies were almost ready. Take care of each other.